Hello, I'm with Mr. Warren Halstrom right now for a Music Matters interview. So I'm going to start off with my first question. What was your path that led you to music? How old were you and what was your inspiration?
That's a great question. And as I look back, the older I get, the important thing is to remember kind of how I got here, because I am a music teacher and just continue to be an active musician. And it's kind of fun sometimes to ask that very question. I said, well, how did you get here? And for aspiring artists and young students, I think it's important for them to hear the story. So thank you for the question. I, like a lot of you musicians, came by it naturally. My grandparents were musicians, and therefore my dad was a musician, and even on my mother's side, there was music. And so my grandparents lived through the Depression in Canada, in the province of Saskatchewan. And they put together a dance band, and in those days, in that part of the country, on Saturday nights, the farming community, would get together at the community hall and they would dance. And they would always have a need for live musicians. Of course, no DJs back in those days. And so that's kind of, in my knowledge of my music heritage, that's where the professional side of it began. And then, as I mentioned, my parents had music, and I remember as a child going over to my grandparents' home on Sunday evenings and us gathering together and making music. And they had these little music books, and we learned various instruments and we would play together. And that musical heritage that I enjoyed and began to appreciate as just being part of our family life was a really, really big part of what made me who I am today. I have brothers and sisters, so I have two older brothers and a younger sister. We're all musicians. So there was just a strong sense of this is what the Halstrom family does. We took piano lessons from the time we were in school age, and I was one that just never stopped. Ultimately, I took 16 years of piano lessons, and then as a high school student, kind of recognized that music was my thing, and if I could possibly do it, I did. And so I was encouraged to go and get my bachelor's degree in music, even though I had a heart to get out there and play in the professional world. I was well advised, and as I grew up as a young high schooler, we had music in schools that was pretty well advanced, and we had jazz band, and so I crossed over from being a woodwind player in middle school to actually playing the piano in the jazz band, and learned. That's where it was in the big band that I learned to read chord charts. And so that was a really important transition, because for the most of us who are raised in the classical music tradition, all the notes are there on the page for you, and you just learn them. Well, in other areas of music, particularly in popular and contemporary and jazz, you have to come up with your own stuff. And so that's where I learned how to interpret chords and chord symbols within the context of a big band when I was in high school. I also realized as I would go out to eat that once in a while restaurants would have this piano in the corner. There'd be this person playing, and I thought, that looks like a much better way to make a living than working in a restaurant cooking or serving. So as a high schooler, at 16, I began to sort of develop my own repertoire of stuff and went to a local restaurant. They didn't even have a piano at the time, and so I said, hey, you're a fine dining restaurant, I'm a piano player, would you like to get a piano and put it in here? And that's how it all began for me. I remember I made $60 a night. This was back in 1980, and I had met the woman of my dreams. I wanted to get married young, and so I needed a source of income. So getting from Warren the classical piano player to Warren the student learning to play in the big band to Warren playing dressed in a velvet tuxedo with a velvet bow tie and a ruffly shirt on the weekends, that was my journey. And so again, I had to learn how to improvise and take songs that were well known and be able to sit down and play for 4 hours, of course not straight, but that was great experience for me to sort of be a professional money-making musician before graduating from high school. And then all the years I got married, the first year out of college, so we were married, and so I played Thursday, Friday, Saturday night at a local restaurant. By this time I had my own sort of digital keyboard. It was a big, heavy Yamaha electric grand piano that I brought and let sit in the restaurant, but I would go to school. At university, I got my bachelor's degree in composition. Of course, took piano lessons and voice and all that kind of thing at that time. Early on at that point, I realized that I wanted to become a recording artist, and even though the classical and jazz training I was having in school was kind of incomplete, and yet I did want to finish it. And again, got some good advice, and rather than go out and try to be a commercial pop musician as a songwriter and player, I was encouraged to go ahead and do my master's degree. And fortunately, not too far a drive south, so I did my undergraduate work at the University of British Columbia at the southern border of Canada and the United States, and I did my master's degree, 40-minute drive down into Bellingham, Washington. And the great thing about doing your master's degree in music is that that's where often the greatest education comes, the best educators. And for me, I got the best of what Canada had to offer in terms of scholastics, and the best of what the United States had to offer regarding performance instruction. So I felt I was well educated. And then graduated with my master's degree in music, knowing that I might use it someday. But I was headed on to the Christian music world to be a recording artist, so I joined another band as a keyboard player, and that's kind of how I developed relationships within the industry, and ultimately recorded my own album in 1989. Got signed to a company called Word Records, which I got to enjoy international distribution of what were cassettes and CDs in those days. Radio airplay, radio was playing my music all over North America, and I got to travel to 11 countries in Europe doing music, and just really enjoyed it. It was hard, of course. I did most of my own scheduling and booking, and so that entrepreneurial side of trying to make a business of my music was really part of my development. Then ultimately just ran into life and having kids, and came off the road and took a position as a full-time local church music director, and I've been doing that now for 30 years. And along the way, I've been able to keep some of my recording artist persona, and so I'm very much a performing coach at the church level. And just in the last number of years at my local church, we've recorded songs in Nashville and done our own music videos and that sort of thing. And so I really, really enjoy setting the next generation up for success. I'm not a huge proponent of going into music as a career, just because it's so difficult and because I want that path. And yet I have some students in my world that we've been able to develop to a level of professional caliber, which is really exciting. So that's my joy, that's my journey. I have 4 kids of my own, all of which are involved in music and perform with me from time to time, and it's great to see that legacy continue.
It's fantastic. Next question. How would you help encourage the next generation of students just about what the benefits music has to offer?
I'm a firm believer in arts education, and so let's just talk globally for a minute. It's very, very important that children learn how to sing when they're children, because everyone can sing. It's only when they're later that they believe that they can no longer do so. I think corporate singing in America, whether it's just the anthem at a game or whether it's at a funeral, it's something that we as a nation need to cherish and enjoy, because when people sing together, their hearts are connected in a unique and wonderful way. But besides that, studies have shown that children that are doing applied musical studies learn better, their brains develop. My daughter teaches preschool in a Title I school here in Gadsden County, and the type of development we see cognitively in the children when they learn rhythm, when they learn songs, when they learn melody, is such that it really moves them ahead in their capacities in other areas of their studies. So that's a great reason to do music, to have music in schools. But when kids get to be in their middle school years and high school years, when they're in chorus, when they're in band, they're practicing, that's when some of the cognitive developmental things happen and really begin to pay off. It is not uncommon that your honor roll students are all in the band, or all in chorus, or all in the orchestra. There's other causal factors as well. But I just think that in order to stay sharp, music's great. Of course, the matters of the heart come into play as well. We want to be human beings. We want to feel things. We want to interpret life. We want to be able to compose. We want to be able to relate. And there's nothing like the arts to connect our heart to our real life. And in today's modern age of YouTube and electronics and that sort of thing, some of that's occurring, but unfortunately not a lot of creation of art for the average student. So when you're in band, when you're in choir, you get to be involved in that corporate experience, and of course being able to create stuff on your own is even better. As we get into adult life, one of the greatest sadnesses, of course, is things like music gets left behind. So I find with my students, and if you're a student, I want you to get to the point where you're not completely reliant upon the musical page or the ensemble, to do music. You need to get to the point where you're going to love music, and if somebody says, hey, will you play a piano song for us? The last thing that we want you to say is, I don't have anything prepared. So always keep something going that you might be able to share.
That's awesome. And last question, why does music matter to you? What is the point of music?
Well, music is a part of who I am, part of my soul, of course. As a Christian, as a believer, I believe that music and the arts are from God, and it's a great way to communicate with the Lord. And it's also a great vehicle to use to communicate strong messages. I am a music pastor, and that's what I do. So from a sacred point of view, it makes a lot of sense. But even on the secular point of view, there's something about music that connects people. Connects people through good times, through bad times. Of course, as a songwriter, song lyrics, but even just the music that today helps us connect is important. It also connects us to our past, that we can pull up something that was composed by someone 200 or 300 years ago, and we can recreate that same experience. So it keeps us connected.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and hope you have a great journey continue.
You're welcome.